We'd like to welcome you back to our webcast podcast, The Struggle is Real in Grief. I'm your co-host, Leon.
And I'm your co-host, Vanessa. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to serve you. Please bless all of the listeners and those who will listen in the future. These and all other blessings we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Today we're continuing our interviews, and we have a very special guest with us today. We've learned to call him Kofi now, but he's Kingsley Palmer, and he is my brother from another mother. And we love him, and we're so thrilled that we have him with us today.
Yes.
We're going to start off by asking you, Kingsley, to tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, education, where you're from, your career, just a few things, really what you want the listeners to know about you.
Okay, let me explain the accent because you're probably trying to figure out where it's coming from. I was born in the United Kingdom, born in London, to immigrant parents who left the Caribbean by way of Jamaica. They went to England, and that's how I turned up there, and the rest you can hear. I'm a product of British education, American education, and also, I would have to say Filipino, because I started my formal education in the United Kingdom, went to college, did that, and then when in 1980, just cutting the whole story short, 1980 I was invited to come to pursue a degree in theology at Oakwood University by way of another relative of ours,
Yes.
Hughes, and studied there, did my bachelor's degrees in communication and theology. Oh, by the way, my mother's still alive, my father passed away some years ago, and so I have a brother in England, all younger than me, I'm the oldest, and one in Hawaii. My wife of 32 years, Lorraine.
Wow.
It'll be 32 years. She's a saint. I finished Oakwood, and of course, took a little while to get into ministry, but when I did, it all kind of started really in South Florida, and moved all the way. We went for a little bit, we moved back to England, went to university again, finished with that, went to India for a while, came back, went to Canada, pastored there, and altogether, I would say it's well over 25, 28 years since I have been in ministry from that time to now. I am currently chaplain, pastor, administrator in the Arizona Conference of Seventh-day Adventists in Phoenix, and I do multiple things. So this is who I am.
Very interesting.
Wow. You got family in Hawaii. We're going to have to talk about that a little later. But I had no idea that you pastored in Canada also. So what a varied background in ministry. So this question, and I know that you have, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. How often in your position do you encounter people that are dealing with grief, and you have to counsel them or advise them in some direction?
Well, because I'm now in administration, it's not as often as I was when I was in pastoring. However, in my travels, you get to know people, you meet them in different churches, and you connect with them, and everybody is attracted to somebody.
Right.
And more often than not, I've had calls from pastors from other states who have family members or relatives. In my position as a chaplain in the hospital, you meet families, they remember you.
Right.
The Children's Hospital, where I did my chaplaincy training, you give them the card, and then all of a sudden they'll call and say, listen, got a family member in such and such a place. We know you. Can you refer us to a pastor in another state, or if the calls will come in and I'm the one that'll handle it. They say, we know who you are, or we know somebody who knows who you are. And then you make the phone calls, you go and visit pretty much the same way and get to know that family that is in grief. For example, probably about a month ago, I got a call from another pastor in another state whose nephew had been shot.
Mm.
And fortunately, it was a fatal shooting. Had some issues, but wanted me to call a relative, the uncle who was looking after him, to help him with the funeral arrangements and things like that. So that was a connection.
Yes.
Other people call me direct, say, we heard about you. Is there anything you can do? Yeah, I can. I don't pastor a church, but I do have access to resources and materials. And sometimes you get to know people. Some of them I've never seen. But when you meet with the family members and they know that you're available, that is a very comforting thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or not, whether they go to church or not, it really doesn't matter. You're there for them.
Exactly.
Multiple things happen. And of course, with respect to the COVID, I'm part of a chaplain's hotline for the carers who take care of the ones who are caring.
Ah.
And one of the things that we've had to try and deal with whenever people call is the disconnect between not being there when their relatives or friends, are getting ready to expire. We know that in the hospitals, what the staff try to do, even if it's a person they don't know, is to look after them. But sometimes we get the calls, and usually it's the aggrieved family.
Yeah.
Make sense of the biggest difficulty is we were not there. Be with the people who are not, be there with the people who were not there, and try to help them walk through what they missed, how they're feeling, where they are, what they would have liked to have said. It's a step-by-step process.
Wow.
You know, there are so many other issues that you have to deal with when it comes to grief, and especially during this pandemic. You had a question?
Yes. Given what's going on with COVID, I'm sure there are lots of people who are experiencing multiple deaths. How do you comfort someone who has multiple deaths that may have occurred within a matter of days, sometimes longer, but when there's so many to deal with almost simultaneously?
I think one of the things you can do is get to know as much about them as you can. What is it that's really hurting them? Each chaplaincy you learn to walk with, you become what they call the midwife. You're not there to make the baby, to help the baby. You're there in a process to walk with them as they go step by step. In most cases, what we have found, rather than being prescriptive, well, you need to do this or you need to do that. You listen to them, you walk them, the better you're able to help them on multiple fronts. You try to get a profile of which member of the family was this, or a friend, what kind of relationship did you have with them? And there are certain questions that you will ask them, particularly how they're feeling, where they are, what's going on with them, what would they have liked to have done but could not do, to kind of steady, you're their friend. And many of these folk, you'll never meet them, face to face, but they're a telephone call away. Here's a card, here's the number, and you work with them as long as you can and as much as you can. And I guess there are no set answers for, well, here's what you need to do. You just have to take each case as it comes. And when the question is asked, what would they have wanted you to do?
Right. Right.
On that relationship. How would they have wanted you to live? You give, you know,
Yes.
legacy would you want to continue, you'd want to take forward that you admired, or you know, or what things that they wanted you to accomplish but you didn't, and what could you do to help fulfill that?
Right, right.
Those kinds of things. In other words, what you're trying to do is let them know, if you did everything you possibly could and you could do no more, don't blame yourself.
Yeah, so important, so important.
You turn in. Yes.
Yeah. And another thing that I heard you say is that you try to get information about the individual and what their relationship was like. So it sounds like in the case of multiple deaths that you just have to take each one individually.
Yes, of course. And that's why we do case studies. We were, as chaplains, okay, this is what you compartmentalize the individuals that they're talking about, whether it's a spouse, a child, a friend, or whoever, and you get a profile. And what kind of relationship did you have with them? Was it good? Was it bad? It was bad. Of course, you can't change anything now, but you can change how you choose to live.
Right.
And life is valuable. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly.
So sharing that and letting me be a part of that.
Wow. So I know in the beginning you shared, gave us some history, and you've traveled different places. You have a varied background. So how do different cultures, the ones that you've experienced, that you're a part of, deal with grief? And is it any differently than what we have here in the United States in general?
Well, interestingly enough, I pastored a church for 12 years, which had 28 different nationalities in it.
Oh, mercy.
Well, the administration, they were the people from the Pacific Islanders, the Tongans, the Hawaiians, the Samoans, did multiple funerals with them. Then our people, you know, Blacks, Africa, the Caribbean, what have you. And of course, we had our Anglos, and then you have the Latinos. It was an interesting mix. And one of the things that I learned is that non-Western people are very, I wouldn't say intense, we're very intimate. And we show, we're more expressive. For example, last year, I'm looking after a Ghanaian church, and one of the elders passed away on the first July 4th, would you believe it, of last year. And I remember we were in the room where this young man passed away, and the way that people conversated with him after he passed, they wanted to still maintain that connection. They were there was the crying, everybody was around the bed, and it was just amazing just to see that dynamic of release, and they're not afraid to express themselves. The Tonga, the Hawaiians are the same, but with our Caucasian brethren, we tend to be more composed. It depends on the kind of family. The dynamics are different. You know, some are more reserved and laid back, but you follow the pattern of what you see. And if you know them, you're going to understand that the cultures are so diverse, but we just as we worship differently, we live differently.
Yes.
And you have to adjust yourself. To the Tongans, I became Tongan, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm that by obvious, but but then when you're dealing with Europeans, those of that, some of the unique things is they tend not to be as expressive as I said, and more kind of what we call more stiff upper lip, more stoic, less. Not that they're not emotional; they keep it inside. And depending on what the mix was, you know, you'll always find someone that can release and some do. I don't want to generalize, but many do. Everyone's grief is grief.
True.
Yes.
like. And you've got to be able to recognize it, be sensitive to it.
Right.
We have gotten to the point where we realize that we need to let people know it's okay to grieve.
Yes.
It's a normal, natural process.
A necessary
process. And we feel it's so much healthier to release that.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads me to this next question. Do you believe that every church should have a grief ministry, and what should it look like? And you alluded to that because of the different cultures in different churches.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of take us in that direction. What do you think it should look like? And should every church have one?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I feel every church should have one. I guess I started so long ago back in ministry that the idea of grief counseling wasn't even mentioned. As the pastor, you were trained and expected to take care of everything and kind of fly by the seat of your pants. But what I have discovered now, because you don't want, when you say, okay, I can go only so far as a pastor, you may want to see a specialist. You don't want to be prescriptive and say, okay, we'll go to a psychologist or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
A person may not be ready for it, but is there a need for grief counseling? Yes, there is. What I did in one of my churches, and I was making a trip overseas, and there was a funeral that they had to take care, the elders had to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking them through it. I said, you've seen what we do. Okay, let's go through the steps. What do we do before the day comes?
Mm-hmm.
Who do we make contact with before, during, and stay in touch with whoever afterwards? Because the follow-up, we tend to think that once we've committed the body to the ground, or whichever way they decide to leave, it's over. You still have the residue of those individuals that you need to make connections with.
So true.
And so it's not over when the benediction is given. In fact, if anything, a new phase is starting because you need to walk with them. I asked and you know, the interesting thing about it, when I left, there's a young man of about 19, baptized him. He knew he didn't have much longer left, but he wanted to be baptized. So I got to baptize him. But then he was still alive. And then about a week or two after I'd left, he passed. And I was told, and I'm so thankful to God, that when I got back, they said, Pastor Palmer, your guys handled it. They handled it. Top to bottom, they handled it. And it made me feel good. And I wish I'd stayed long enough after that to be able to have gone further with them.
Yeah.
That was just one of those things. But all too often, we don't know. We're not geared to. Now we know more than we ever did.
Right.
And to put some things in place to ask people who are good, who have the gift of comforting, finding out where they are, who are the natural criers, who are the natural consolers, who are the natural.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter what culture they belong to, because death is the equalizer.
Yes, it is.
You cry, something's going to happen. And there are people that we have in our churches, maybe identifying some of them and saying, you seem to have a gift. Let's find out about it.
Yeah.
Why do people, why are they attracted to you? You're a caring person. And then put together a program. Look, here's what we do. You've seen what we do. Is there anything that you've seen that we might be missing in the process of taking care of an individual? And saying, and empowering them to say, okay, you're the person, the follow-up person after the funeral is done. Okay, we want you to stay in touch with that individual as long as the family or whoever it is, you can do for them what they don't want to be done, and get in touch with them. Send them, find out as much as you can if their birthdays.
Yes.
Person's birthday, you know, of course, when that comes around after they've been gone, they can be in a different place.
Yes.
And, you know, if you have that information to hand, then the individual, your contact person, can develop friends. And you know what happens? It's an evangelistic outreach too.
Definitely,
Yes,
definitely.
we have discovered that. We appreciate that because we are on a mission to try to educate even conference officials,
Yes.
other pastors,
Yes.
that this is such a need in our churches, in all churches, and especially in our churches now where we haven't seen that. When I grew up, there were individuals in the church that may send a card. But after the funeral, that was it. You never heard anything else about it, about the family, about what they're dealing with. And we're on a mission to try to get pastors and conference officials to understand this is very important because every church is going to have somebody going through grief all the time.
And it's a situation that's not going to go away. So we might as well get it right and be active in this ministry.
Yeah, like I said, it is an outreach. When you can send, you can call that person up, and usually the length is a good 3 to 6 months or even longer. You're staying in touch with them, and of course, there's a cutoff point for that individual. Is there? And then in the process of doing that, you find out more about the family and the family members, and it has been. I have seen where people are, well, you didn't know me, but I remember your connection with so and so. I'm so and so, and I got this issue or something else. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
You know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That is so true, which leads to my last question. Do you have any words of encouragement or guidance for those that are in the midst of this struggle in grief?
You're talking about the recipients, the family. I want to be sure. Those that are struggling with grief, I would say try to meet them where they are. Right? As pastors, we're taught to be prescriptive. You can't prescribe the things for certain people. I would say that the personal contact, right? The follow through, the being interested in who they are, the person that they have lost, letting them know that you are going to stay with them, and you have to keep your promise that you're going to.
That's true.
You've got to put it in your mind that a person who's just lost someone is as important as a person as if they never died or they're still alive. And if they are in a struggle, you have to recognize your limitations. And if you build the bond, if you make the bond and you build a relationship, they may be more open because they trust you. Trust is so important.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Trust is extremely important. If I know that you cared for me because you were open to me, I can build trust, and from trust, you can go so many different places. And you don't have to talk about the church that you belong to. You don't have to talk about the religion.
True.
Listen to what they say, find out what they're interested in, and you walk with them through those interests. Hey, this is something that you used to do before. I know you probably haven't done it. Maybe you're not ready. But how was it helping you when that person was alive? And they will tell you. Now, if you thought about going back to it, to be rebuilding, because that individual, depending on who it was, I think they would want to do that. And if not, you got to do something for yourself.
Yes. So it's definitely important to be empathetic. It's important for us to, reach out as much as we can, to remind them that it's important for them to be kind to themselves, not to beat themselves up because they're going through this process. Wow. Well, I think that we have gained a better understanding of some things that need to be focused on when we're relating to people who are grieving. And we can't thank you enough for sharing with us and being with us today.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask you back again. And seeing that you're my little brother, I don't think that you can refuse me. So we'll have to have you back again.
They say you can choose your friends, not your family. But okay.
But we love you and we appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yes.
Yes.
One more thing. It came to me. Sometimes it's always good to be a good listener.
Oh, yes. Yes.
A good listener.
Yes.
That is so important.
And whether the person you're going to meet them face to face or not, if you've listened, it sends a message that you were paying attention to me. And, oh, you brought up things that I didn't think you would have heard. And that can form an ongoing, long-going relationship. Talk less, hear more.
Yes.
That is true.
Yes.
That is true. Well, we appreciate the time that you spent with us, and we want everyone to make sure that in listening to this webcast podcast, if you know someone that can benefit from it, please turn them in this direction.
Yes.
And keep your ears to the ground. Every Tuesday we have a new session that will come up.
Yes.
And
the podcast can be found on iTunes as well as Spotify and iHeartRadio.
All right. And the webcast, we can find it on Facebook under Verrett Ministries.
Verrett Ministries. You need to see that.
That's our YouTube channel as well.
That's also our YouTube channel.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the opportunity and the privilege. And as ever, it was always fun when we hang out together. We hope that people listen to it. They may find some encouragement.
Yeah, yes, that's the hope.
Well, God bless.
Yes.
God bless you. You all take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.